Path of Exile's 3.27 update is on the horizon, and we're going to be getting more information on that patch soon, but I wanted to take the opportunity in this video to wrap up my coverage on Path of Exile 2's 0.3 update. Now recently I've been going over some of the big issues that I have with the game in individual videos on each topic, but I think it's important to discuss everything that this update did right, and there's a lot of things here. In fact, 0.3 has easily been the most fun I've had playing Path of Exile 2 so far, and I believe the game is going in the right direction now, which is not the vibe I had coming out of patch 0.2. So let's get straight into it, beginning with the biggest positive of the third Edict's update for me, which is crafting. Now, crafting in Path of Exile 2 was almost non-existent in prior updates. There were methods to craft very good items, but they were reserved for high-end crafters, utilising omens that simply did not exist for the average player, and as a result they were extremely expensive. But patch 0.3 has introduced powerful crafting mechanics to Path of Exile 2 in a way that enables crafting at all budgets, not just at the high end. And they've done this with three primary changes. The first is the introduction of greater and perfect currency, for example greater exalted orbs or perfect transmutes, which essentially cull lower level modifiers from the possibility of outcomes upon use, resulting in much better modifiers. You may still get a modifier type that you don't want, because the level restriction on modifier culling cannot completely remove a modifier type from the pool, but it does provide a very powerful method to secure much stronger modifiers by skewing the odds in your favour. Now this has been a great addition to Path of Exile 2, and it's something that has been missing in 0.2 and prior, a way to add serious value to dropped bases. Before 0.3, I thought that an Orb of Scouring would eventually be added to the game to allow you to reset items to normal rarity and essentially go the route of PoE 1 crafting. But after the addition of greater and perfect currency items, I can now see the vision for crafting in PoE 2, and I like where it's going. But the new tiers of currency weren't the only changes to crafting. We also have the overhauled essences, which are now much more useful than before. Greater essences guarantee a particular modifier when upgrading from magic to rare, while perfect essences provide an add-remove modifier function to apply a special modifier in return. These changes have been great in my experience playing through this patch. I used almost all of the essences that I dropped in my first campaign playthrough at League launch to secure valuable modifiers like flat damage on my weapon or resistance on my armor pieces, and I've also had a lot of fun playing around with the perfect essences for some higher end crafting projects. Now generally speaking, the new essences pair very well with the new greater and perfect currency options, because there's potential there to secure 2 or 3 useful modifiers right out of the gate with a craft from scratch item. But the new crafting options do not stop there, because we also have the new Abyss mechanic, bringing with it another fresh crafting system known as Desecration, allowing you to use another new pseudo-currency item, Bones, to add unrevealed desecrated modifiers, and the desecrated modifier can then be revealed to choose between 3 different modifiers, including some interesting desecration-only modifiers. And once again, just like with greater and perfect currency and essences, these systems complement each other nicely rather than stepping on each other's toes. It feels like they really thought out the implementation of these new systems very well to ensure they kind of synergize with each other, and the result is that you can combine them to fairly deterministically craft an item with 3 or 4 good modifiers for your build. Now beyond that, there's the new omens and other things for higher end crafting, which is exceptionally powerful right now, and if you have access to enough of the right currency items and omens, you can almost craft any item in the game from scratch. And I do think crafting at the top end may be a tad too powerful right now, but regardless, the changes to crafting in patch 0.3 are a giant W for Path of Exile 2, and I'm interested to see how they go about implementing Abyss into the core game and seeing how accessible Desecration crafting will be in 0.4 and beyond. Okay, moving on from crafting to another massive positive for patch 0.3, it's asynchronous trading. Now, I'm mostly a solo self-found player, but this league I had to try out trade with the new systems being added, and really I cannot say enough good things about the new trade system. How they managed to pull this off in a way that seemingly has very few or no issues from the very start is completely beyond me, and this new system is everything that players have been asking for years in Path of Exile 1, and now that it's been added to PoE 2, I expect PoE 1 will get it soon, if not in 3.27. And this is just a huge win for Path of Exile players overall. So the asynchronous trading feature allows you to browse instantly purchasable items through the trade website or in-game, and then you can spend some gold to instantly teleport to a player's hideout and buy their for-sale items directly from their sales stash, without the need for them to be there to make the trade. This means that they can continue to map or do whatever they're doing, and they don't even need to be online for the sale to go through. Now there's a few things to say about this feature. Firstly, in my own experience, I had a build idea that required a unique item with a specific corruption modifier, and none of them were for sale on trade listings. Therefore, I needed to purchase a bunch of them and corrupt them myself in the hopes of finding the right corruption modifier. I think I remember it being like a 1 in 25 or something like that to get the right outcome. Now in the old system, this would mean I'd need to message each seller individually, wait for them to respond, and then teleport to them and wait for them to actually sell the item to me. Which would be okay-ish if every seller responds, but that's just not how it works out at all. Especially for low-value items, you'd message a bunch of sellers and rarely ever get a response. On top of that, you could only interact with trade listings where the seller was actually online at the time. But with this new system, this type of interaction is massively improved. In this example, I was able to open up the trade search on my second monitor and teleport to each person's hideout and secure the item instantly before immediately teleporting to the next hideout to do the same. I think I ended up needing around 30 items before I hit the right corruption outcome, but the whole process took maybe 7 or 8 minutes, which is a giant improvement compared to the old system, and sure, I did spend some gold to do it, but it was well worth the gold spent. So that's just one scenario where asynchronous trade is a giant improvement, but there's another one that I can think of that's very important, and that's the longevity of a league. Usually when a player quits for the league, all of their items that were up for trade are gone forever because that player isn't logging in again, so they won't be there to be able to make those trades. But with the new system, all listings remain active, even when the player that has listed them goes inactive for an extended period of time. Anyone can see those listings and purchase them without the need for the seller to be present. Now this has a few implications. One is that the prices for items that aren't too rare are generally more stable across a 24-hour period because listings remain active and visible at all times. But more importantly than that is that this improves the potential longevity of any given league for a good amount of players that want to continue playing. This is because they're still able to purchase things that they need to continually make new characters or improve their current characters, as the supply of items is less impacted by player retention, and I think that's a great thing. Now there are a few annoying things going on with some scam attempts and similar things like price fixing with the trade site not correctly adjusting for currency values, but I think all of these issues can be improved over time, and overall, asynchronous trading is another giant win for Path of Exile 2. Now moving on, it's a big one, Act 4, and it's just incredible. The interesting thing here for me is that I wasn't actually that excited about Act 4 going into 0.3's launch, and this is likely due to playing through Acts 1, 2, and 3 and their cruel versions so many times in 0.1 and 0.2 that the fascination with the campaign was dying out a bit for me. Even though it was great quality and the most fun part of the game for me, it was quickly becoming less and less interesting. But the introduction of Act 4 has completely reinvigorated the campaign for me, and I think it has a lot to do with the removal of Cruel and the story continuity. Together, that has been a big improvement. But it's also just the fact that Act 4 has an incredibly high quality bar. You know, looking back at the early access launch, I remember thinking that Act 1 was so good that I didn't know how they'd be able to top it, especially with Acts 2 and 3 not quite reaching that level of quality in my opinion, but Act 4 has hit that quality mark and then some. In my opinion, this is quite comfortably the best act in the game now, and in a similar way from the early access launch when I was thinking about how Act 4 could possibly reach Act 1's quality, I'm now wondering how Act 5 and 6 will be able to top Act 4. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can come up with for the remainder of the campaign. But for Act 4, there's so much that has been done right here. I love the choice that you have to freely go to the islands in any order you want to, and I really enjoy how distinct each island feels compared to the next. Also, the areas just look incredible, and I think generally speaking the progression of the campaign now compared to 0.2 feels so much better, I know that they have made some changes to monster life and a few other balance changes towards the middle and the end of patch 0.2, and these have made a great deal of improvement to how you feel progressing the campaign. I think there are a lot less of those moments where you really feel the desperate need for a gear upgrade because everything is a bit more streamlined. And part of that, of course, is the addition of Abyss, which notably we may not have in the bulk of the campaign in 0.4 onwards, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. The interesting thing though with Abyss in the campaign is that it just felt amazing to interact with, right from the very beginning. It felt rewarding to do because it meant you could semi-deterministically craft your gear with desecration crafting, which is certainly part of the reason for the campaign feeling a bit less of a slog this time around, because our gear power level was generally higher with these added modifiers taken into account. Lastly, in this section, I'll mention the interludes, 3 mini-acts designed to temporarily take the place of Act 5 and 6. I don't have too much to say about these. I think they're just much better than replaying an act or two again, and GGG are the masters of asset reuse, and I don't mean that in a negative way either. They are just so good at repurposing assets in a great way, and the most recent showcase of this is the interludes, most of which is repackaged assets. And I really like how they were able to reuse some of the end bosses from the interludes and Act 4 in new endgame maps to make some interesting encounters there and tie that in with the new lineage support gems, which is a perfect segue. Support gem changes. Now, I will say that I think there's a lot of work to be done here in regards to balance. Obviously, removing the support gem limit was a huge change that has left some extreme imbalance in the game. A good example is multi-projectiles on every grenade skill, which is just crazy powerful, especially early into the campaign. However, overall, I think this is a great change. The old system was a novel idea, and I think they probably could have followed it a bit further to see where it could go, but ultimately they scrapped it in favour of being able to use multiple of the same support gems, and I think this is just more freedom for the players, less restrictions, and it should therefore be a good thing for buildcraft going forward. There will of course need to be quite a substantial rebalance of support gems following these changes, because we still have some of the remnants of that old system in the game, but I think it's going in the right direction. Now, lineage support gems are also an interesting addition to the game, and once again, overall I'm a fan of these. I think having a class of support gems that are kind of chase items is an interesting concept, especially with some of them having locked drop locations so they can essentially be target farmed. And it has added an additional layer of progression to your character in many cases, where a lineage support gem may be an obvious upgrade to a normal one, but even better than that is when a lineage support gem may offer you a new angle to scale your build, and you can then take your build in a new direction, and I think that's a really fun concept. Now obviously there are concerns here once more for balance. Some of the lineage support gems are just a bit ridiculous. Rakiata's Flow and Atalui's Bloodletting come to mind here. But once again, like the imbalances that the removal of the support gem limit have caused, these lineage support gems can also be addressed in time. Now lastly, I want to discuss the introduction of the sprint mechanic. Once again, I think this newly introduced system is one that will need a lot of fine-tuning, but I think it has been quite a good addition to the game overall. It does kind of solve what they were attempting to solve, which is the dull periods between combat as a result of some of the larger maps, and this mechanic has also been quite a large factor in improving the feel of the campaign as well, especially in the earlier zones where you really do feel quite slow. Now, sprint itself does have a few issues. I think the bumping into small terrain and getting mini-stunned quickly becomes quite irritating, and I really do believe that sprint should be disabled in boss fights. I feel like they went out of their way to design all of these interesting encounters, like Doryani's Hover Slam, for example, where you need to get out of the way in the last moments of that slam, or the exploding boss that chases you in Act 2, or even the Arbiter's Falling Meteors phase. All of these mechanics just feel like a joke when you're able to sprint and completely trivialize them. And I just think it would be a bit of a shame if that remains a thing, but on the whole, I do think that sprint is another positive for patch 0.3. Now overall, I just want to say at the end of this video, I've had the most fun playing this patch compared to 0.1 or 0.2, and the game's not there yet, but I'm excited for the direction that Path of Exile 2 is taking. And I'm especially looking forward to 0.4 in December, because we already know that it's supposed to be a patch that's primarily addressing the endgame, which is arguably the area of the game that's most in need of changes right now. So I'm interested to see exactly what they're going to cook up for that update. But that's going to be it for this one. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.